everyone. My name is Kristin Eaves, and welcome to the Carson Observer podcast. This is the official podcast for Carson Accountability and Transparency. For those of you who aren't familiar with Carson Accountability and Transparency, aka PAC, is responsible for connecting you with the public pillars who shape our community and keep the city running, educating you about government and how it functions, and informing you about the happenings in Carson and how it impacts your daily life. Today, I am so excited to have Barry Waite, current CEO and president of Carson Chamber of Commerce, as our guest. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Mr. Barry Waite, Barry is a city council member. He is the chamber president, a consultant, educator, a South Bay local entertainer, and an all-around great guy. And I am so excited to be talking to him today. So without further ado, we're going to turn it over to Mr. Waite. Welcome to the show, and thank you for being here with us today. I'm just so glad to be able to speak with you. So we're going to get right into it. Barry, tell everybody about who you are, what you do, and how the residents of Carson may know you.
Okay, so I've been around Carson. I've been around Carson a minute, as they say. So back in 1987, I just finished my master's degree, and the city of Carson, I was told by the internship office at school, needed somebody to fill in for 30 to 90 days while this woman, Ronette, was out on disability. And I thought, oh, well, I need money. I just get out of school. Yeah, I need, sure. And my mom had worked in Carson probably 15 years earlier when I was a kid. And so at Soule Steel Company, which later became the city's corporate yard. But anyway, so I interviewed for the job, and then sure enough, I got it, and working in the city manager's office. And it was a real small shop. So there was the city manager and two clerical staff, and then Ronette, who was out, and then this other woman, Mary Beth, who was getting ready to go on vacation. So they wanted Mary Beth to explain to me what she did just to help out. But apparently somebody had gotten the wires crossed on that, and she wasn't going on vacation. She was quitting. And so with 2 hours of training, then I became the assistant to the city manager. His name was Dick Gunnarsson. He was a great guy. And so it was baptism by fire, and there was a lot going on. That was July 17th of 1987. So just past the 37-year mark. Time flies. And so with the city, I worked 4 years in the city manager's office, and then I felt like I was just doing the same thing over again. And so, and during that time, we got the first PCs in the city. So now you may think, oh, well, that was early. People didn't have PCs. Like, no, just we didn't have PCs, but most cities already had that. So we were kind of behind on that and ahead on some other things. But I kind of had a computer background. So they figured, oh, well, they just figured this stuff out. And so I was put in charge of stuff. And then I moved to the planning department, and I really had fun in planning. It was cool because in Carson, you get to work on such interesting projects. Like years later, a friend of mine in Manhattan Beach asked me, so what kind of projects are you working on now in Carson? And I told him, we're working on this. We're working on this industrial project. We're working on this housing development. We're working on this retail project. We're doing brownfield abatement, the old landfills and such. Anyway, we had all these things going on. He goes, oh, all I do is single family home additions in Manhattan Beach. He said, that's all there is. I should have applied for a job in Carson. So, and he actually left and came to the university. But yeah, so he was saying it's so much more interesting a place to be a planner. So I was a planner. I was also the acting information services manager when we brought in our new computer system. So that was exciting. And we got a computer network and we got financial systems, all those dull things that actually make a city run. So then I went to public safety for a year. It was not my favorite place to work. Just, I'll be blunt. We had a boss who was always telling us he was a good Christian, which was good because you couldn't tell by watching him. But anyway, I still liked him, but he was hard to work for. So then I moved to engineering and spent 4 years there doing as the engineering analyst, which was really cool, working on street projects and as the analyst and all these other things. Well, the city started doing geographic information systems then. And so they gave that to me as well. So I had this much, it's called GIS, Geographic Information Systems, and I had this much engineering. And over time it did this. And they finally said, you know what, let's just throw this piece out. And so then I had GIS, where Carson was really a leader on that. And Carson still has a lot of leadership in that area, which is pretty cool. And some of the really innovative things that Carson's staff did over the years. And the council was supportive, management was supportive. It was really good. So I did that for several years. And then the economic development manager position opened, business development specifically. And a friend of mine was retiring from that position. He said, look, all the stuff you're doing in GIS is supporting economic development. So it makes sense for you to move over there. And as they say, what are the three most important things in real estate? Location, 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 right? So geography is a great way to describe the community. It's a great way to analyze the community and to look at what we can do. So I really enjoyed that. And so sure enough, I became the business development manager in 2007 and stayed in that position until I retired in 2016. So, and I had housing and I had employment development and I had planning all reporting to me at some point or other in there. And anyway, just got to do a lot of really cool stuff. While my colleagues in other cities were talking about, yeah, you know, we're trying to get a Taco Bell. Like, come on. No, in Carson, we got another Target store. Yeah. So, yeah, it was a lot of fun.
So, Barry, you have just given us a really beautiful story of your time in Carson. You know so much about the groundwork, have participated in a lot of the groundwork and a lot of what residents see today. I have two questions. You've moved around throughout the city a lot. Outside of your expertise in a few areas that has been able to transcend to these other areas that you were able to work in, what do you think? What was the driving force behind your movement throughout the city for all those years?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm really glad you asked, because what happened was with each of these, an opportunity came up for something that needed to be done, and the boss said, "Hey, I need you to do that." I'm like, okay, so there I go, and so. Taking on IT, taking on block grant, working in redevelopment, it was just opportunities came up and things that needed to be done. And when you work in a what's the good word? A dynamic community like Carson, yeah, those opportunities that you just don't get in most places. And it's small enough that you can be hands-on. As opposed to, city of LA, where, your job is to move this one lever and you're an expert on moving that lever. Well, in Carson, you learn about how the whole thing works and you're part of a team. So you're not running solo like in a small city like Lomita, where I'm a council member. We only have 40 something staff people. So our staff people have to be really a jack of all trades. So, they're pushed the other direction. So I think Carson's really the sweet spot. And I tell people that tell my students that, because I teach GIS at USC. I've been teaching there since 2007 in the School of Public Policy. And so I tell my students that a city like that size is a great opportunity because you can move around and do things, not get pigeonholed, and there's the opportunities there. So, I was far from alone in being able to do that. So, it was, I think that was really neat. And frankly, there's a lot more people that I miss working with than I don't miss working with. That's a very small number. So, I got to work with a lot of really, really good, caring, smart people.
Lovely. So it sounds just like Carson is a really, like you mentioned, dynamic city. And there's a lot of opportunities to make the city special by way of GIS, by way of economic development. And it seems like you've had support from other people throughout the city council over the years to drive some really cool projects that make Carson what it is today. So you've retired from the city now at that point, and I want to talk more about your next step. So you've learned and drove all of this work in the city of Carson, and what led you to the Chamber of Commerce?
Well, in economic development, I partnered with the chamber a lot. We were like two hands working together to, there's backing up here. There's three things you can do in economic development, and there are only three things, but this is everything in economic development. It's business retention, keeping the businesses that you have, business expansion, helping those businesses grow, and business attraction. Everything falls into those three, right? So along with the chamber, it's a great partnership, at least it can be, and was for us. It's a great partnership in being able to bring all the different resources to make each of those three things happen at the right times. So so I worked with the chamber a lot as business development manager. So I left in 2016, and in 2019, John, who had been the president of the chamber for years and years, he retired and moved to Arizona. And so they did a recruitment, and the person they were going to hire, her employer heard about it, and they said, "Oh, you can't possibly leave." And I don't blame him. She's great. I know her. And so then they did another recruitment. This takes a while. And that recruitment, at the end of it, the person just, it was not going to work out. So my wife and I were out on a hike in Will Rogers State Park. Highly recommended, by the way. Fun place. And so I saw this on my phone. I'm like, crud. And I told my wife, and she said, "You know everybody over there. Why don't you just go fill in for a little while they hire somebody?" I said, okay. Yeah, it's all working with friends. Sure, why not? And so I offered that to the chamber and said, "So when do you need me?" And they said, "How about sometime yesterday?" So so I started in 2021, early 2021, in the midst of COVID. So it was exciting trying to do events and get things going. But it was all people I liked and knew. And they said, "Can we just drop the interim part? Can you just stay for a while?" And I said, "Yeah, I can stay a little while." But, so after the 3-year mark, I realized, so here's the thing. If you try to focus on everything, you focus on nothing. And I thought the chamber is healthy and stable, and the chamber's ready to grow with the community. And I said, they need somebody who can do that, who can focus on these things, because I can't focus on all those things. I've got too many other things going on, and those aren't necessarily my gifts, of what I'm good at. And you got to recognize what you're good at and what you're not.
Yeah.
So that's when I said, okay, it's time for the chamber to bring in a real chamber president who this is their thing, and that'll be good.
Gotcha. Okay. But I want to go back a few steps because, again, TAT is about educating the city of Carson residents. And so I want to go back. I like what you mentioned about what the purpose of economic development is: retention, expansion, attraction. So let's talk a little bit more about, well, that technically is the purpose of the chamber, but during that time when you were active president, especially during the time of COVID, tell us a little bit more about what was going on with some of the Carson businesses. How was the city chamber able to assist, and what kind of visions or conversations were happening during that time in order to maintain the businesses that exist in Carson? Because I'll say this, me being a resident, we have some long-standing businesses that we would hate to see go, that we've actually seen go, particularly around COVID. But then there's also those ones that have remained. When I think of food, I think of like Family Fish. I don't know what you guys' involvement is around ensuring a Kia lives within the city still. I don't know. I'm thinking about bringing the Porsche experience to the city. Where's some other great places? The Target, we can even get into that. So tell me a little bit more about the role of the chamber.
Yeah, so let's talk about what a chamber does. So a chamber helps its businesses succeed. That's the short version, right? So how do you do that? You do that by creating opportunities for networking and for business to business. So a lot of our businesses in town are supporting other businesses, including some, everything from restaurant supply, which is kind of obvious, to we have companies in town in the aerospace business who build, like there's a company that builds the electronics that go in ejection seats. All the electronics and all the ejection seats in the U.S. military come from a plant in Carson. I'm not telling you where it is, but anyway. So that's a business to business kind of thing. And they have other partners. If you didn't know this, we have an industry cluster in Carson of aerospace companies. And those are jobs that pay well. So, which, let me say this, here's an important thing to understand about Carson. Carson is not a low-income community. And I swear, I spent more time in my years explaining this to residents than to outsiders. Because outsiders coming in, they've done their research and they're like, oh, I'm going to come here and make some money. But people who live here, they keep saying this. Well, I'm doing pretty well, but I know a lot of my neighbors are on a fixed income or whatever. And then you go ask the neighbors, well, how are you doing? Well, I'm doing pretty well, but my neighbors, and if you just keep on rolling that out, you realize most people in Carson are doing pretty well. So Carson residents have a decent income, and you also have a lot of multi-generational households because it tends to be larger homes, right? So you have anybody from aunt or uncle to cousins living with them and bringing extra income into the household, which means you have a much higher level of disposable income than in a lot of the cities around our area. So Carson residents are doing overall, obviously, some are doing better, some not so much, but overall, Carson residents are doing just fine. And if you look at the cost of housing now, they need to be. So, because Carson is no longer a cheap place to live either. And that's been true for some time. But anyway, so what's a chamber do? So we do networking and we do business to business. We advocate for businesses. And here's a really important one. Forgot another one. We provide information. So we provide access to programs and things like that, like Small Business Development Center, city programs. So we get calls all the time from businesses wanting to know, how do I deal with this or that? So anyway, providing information is a big part of what we do. But then the final piece is helping businesses connect with the community. So, for example, you have, this was some years back, we had a business that was having trouble with something and they needed support from the community. And so they reached out to the people around them and said, we need your help on this. We need your support. And the community said, and who are you? Because they had no connection to the community. Yeah. And so I tell our businesses this regularly, small and large, be involved when things are good. So you have the community when you need them. And then the other piece of that, though, that I think is really cool is we find that once a business gets involved in the community and their employees are now working with the Boys and Girls Club, they're doing tree planting, they're participating in Relay for Life, Carson Women's Club, whatever it may be, once they're involved in the community, they like it. And that's when you form those organic connections that really matter. And that's when you have that ecosystem of mutual support where the businesses are truly supporting the community, and the community and the businesses are one, And so this was a great example. We had a company, there's a battery company in Carson that outgrew its building, and by a lot. And so this is when I was working for the city, and we met with them and said, so where are you looking at? And they said, and he gave me a couple of locations he was looking at, all in Carson. And I said, oh, so you're going to stay in Carson? And he looked a little surprised, and he said, well, we hadn't really thought about anything else. That's where we want to be. That is it. We don't want businesses to start thinking about going somewhere else. We want them to think, how do I grow in this community? Because this is my community too. So if you look around, you see we have a lot of businesses who are far from new here. Matter of fact, we have one business, Do Common, which is an aerospace company. And they are also the oldest company in LA County. So now they're in the aerospace world. Yeah. And they're in Carson. And they started off as a clock company. So they're not making clocks anymore, but now they build, airliner parts, big stuff. So they're in the north end of town, and nice folks. So we honored them a few years back. So those are the things that the chamber helps happen. And so if you look at what those things all have in common, they're all about making connections. So that's what we do. So let me give a shout out to Kat, because Kat makes those connections in the community. And since newspaper coverage just sure ain't what it used to be anywhere, but particularly in the South Bay, there's just not much coverage anymore. So how else are people going to know what's going on if you don't have somebody like Kat who's keeping people honest? And that's just good government. So if you'd like to expand to Lomita, we'd be more than happy to have that.
Thank you. Well said. What we call it? LAT?
LAT, yeah.
It doesn't have the same ring, but...
How about supporting people, Lomita, and transparency? So it'd be SPLAT.
Maybe.
Okay, back to the drawing board. Sorry, I tried.
Okay, well, you've given us a lot of information about just business in Carson, and really helped us understand some of the roots of how business plays such an important economic driver as well as community driver for Carson residents. I think one question I have is, what do you think, being the president of the Carson Chamber of Commerce, What do you think is most important for residents to know? How can they better interact with the chamber?
Well, for one thing, we allow individual memberships for $100 a year, and that is not a bad idea. So, and by the way, I'm a chamber member. My business, Waite Consulting Services, is a member of the chamber. So
Okay.
that was part of why I was willing to come over and help. So that's one. Even bigger one, though, when you know of things going on in the community where the businesses should be involved, let us know. That's a real big one. Help us make connections between people, right? Participate in events that we have, because people want to come and they want to come and meet somebody. They want to talk to somebody. So don't assume that the businesses, I think this is kind of the thing. People assume the businesses don't really want to talk to them and they just want to do their own thing. And that's just not real. I'm sure that there are certainly some people like that, but most of our businesses are more than open to talking with the community and learning more, because they've got a huge investment here. So let me give you a couple of examples. So like Chick-fil-A, the operator there, Chris, had not even been in Carson, just driving through before he started, before they opened the store in I think they opened in 2011. Yeah. So there was just, he didn't really know. So, but right away, I mean, he is a huge Carson lover now. So he talks to the other operators in the South Bay, and they talk about problems they have with graffiti. They have problems with gangs. This is Torrance we're talking about. They have trouble with homeless. He said they don't have any of those. And he says, this is just a nice community. These are nice people. And if he could open another one, if they'd let him open another one, he'd do it. So he also has low turnover. He has loyal employees, which I will say a big chunk of that is him. He's a nice person to work for. He supports his employees, and he keeps a very positive environment in the store. So, and it's a very welcoming environment. It's a very diverse employee group he has there, and he likes it that way. He wants everybody to feel like this is it's their store where they're working. It's not just, you're not just showing up for the company and you get your paycheck and goodbye. So, that's common that I've had people. Another one, when Chili's opened, that was the second biggest opening in the company's history.
Oh, wow.
And continued to do well. And the guy who opened that immediately started looking for another restaurant to bring in. And guess who he worked for later on? But Buffalo Wild Wings. Well, now you have Buffalo Wild Wings in Carson. So, you see that. You see that a lot. So go ahead.
What the examples you're giving me definitely play into the business retention component.
Yeah.
Being in an area where the owners and operators feel safe, feel welcomed by the community. I want to talk more about the business attraction. I'm sure you know that many residents are barking or knocking, politely asking, whatever, for a Trader Joe's. As you mentioned, Carson is not a low-income city.
Right.
And because of that, a lot of people are more aware of what's been going in their bodies and also venturing out to other cities that offer spaces like a Trader Joe's or Whole Foods. I want to talk more about attracting new businesses as Carson and its city, its residents continue to evolve and gain more disposable income. Instead of us having to drive out to Torrance, the Manhattan beaches of the world, or even Long Beach to get a fresher produce, just a better quality of food. Um, because we have all of this traction, how can the chamber support attracting businesses that actually align with the values of this evolving resident?
So let me give you some good and some bad here.
Yeah.
So on the good side, again, Carson residents have a good degree of disposable income. Also on the good side, Carson has a very large daytime population. So 50,000 people a day come into Carson who do not live in Carson, people like me, and spend money. Every day, I go out to lunch almost every day. And I go to restaurants around the mall. I go to my father's barbecue. I can give you my list of places, and please join me at any of those. I post pictures because we like to share anyway, and so and keep it local, right? So that's a lot of money that flows in for daytime traffic for restaurants and stores. So that's also a plus. Let's look at the minuses, though. Here's the first one, and it's a huge one. Carson is very low density. So, and here's the way that we help the planning commissioners see this. We took the commissioners on the Goodyear blimp. So, which there was the old blimp, which was pretty much like a 1950s RV inside. It was a little scary, but it was cool. So anyway, they have the old gondola at Torrance Airport now, but the new one seats twice as many people. I still haven't gotten a ride on that, but want to. So what we did is we took the commissioners and we flew out over the beach cities, and you are immediately hit by how much higher the density of population is in the beach communities. Carson is very low density. Standard is 5,000 square foot lots. You go to the beach cities, a 5,000 square foot lot is 6 units. And Carson is 1. And Carson also has wide streets. And Carson has a lot of non-residential areas, including the university and everything else. And the university, by the way, is adding housing as fast as they can. That is a help. Carson Street added all of the multifamily over the years. And part of the reason the community supported that was because they understood, look, if we want to get the retail we want, we need more bodies, because it's two things. It is rooftops times income. Those are the only two numbers that these people care about. And in Carson, you got the income number, but the number of rooftops is low. So that's challenge number 1. And by the way, Lomita would also love to have a Trader Joe's. So, and we just got a grocery outlet. So, but that's the only real grocery store we have in town. So Carson is not alone in this. Okay, so another problem as far as getting a grocery store in town is the lack of good sites, particularly on the north side of town. So you need a certain amount of acreage. Please don't ask me the number offhand, but you need a certain amount of acreage to attract a major grocery store. And what used to be the Ralph's store on the north end of town. So my wife worked for Ralph's in the corporate office. So I got to hear the backstory on this years ago. That was a boys' market that they inherited. And they hated that store, even though it was the closest store to the corporate office. So rather than invest in it, they just let it deteriorate until their lease expired, which they had a very long lease. And then when the lease expired, they told the landlord, well, can you give us free rent? Because we're a draw for everybody else. And the landlord said, don't think so. And I would say that I found that landlord to be challenging to work with in getting them to make the improvements that you need to be attractive as well, which I'm hoping that we turn the corner on that. I don't know. I'm not going to castigate them publicly because it's all about what's possible, right? So, but that is a big issue, is lack of good sites. And Like people say, oh, there's this location on Wilmington. Okay. And on the other side of that is industrial, as far as you can see. That does not attract a grocery store. What attracts grocery stores? One thing only, residents. So that is the challenge. It's not insurmountable, but I see a lot of people just discounting that and go, no, they just don't want to be here. Like, okay, you can look online and look up Trader Joe's siting requirements, and you will find it. And you can look for any major retailer just about, and you'll find it listed. And you can see how the numbers pan out. But that number one problem is the low density in Carson, which is always seen as a positive thing, leads to this. And the other negative of that is that kids grow up and then, they're ready to move out. They have to move away because there's so little rental housing in Carson. So they move away and then maybe they move back. So if you look at the age graph of Carson, you got younger people. My dog's knocking at the door. Come back later, I tell you. So you got the younger people, and then young adults, it really scrunches in, and then it comes back out again because that age group can't afford to live in Carson. So when you talk about affordable housing, people seem to think somehow this is some other, right? We like to do othering in this country, unfortunately. It's not others, it's our kids who have to move to Inland Empire or wherever, where they can get affordable housing. And then later on, hopefully they'll buy something, move back to the community. And I say this with 2 adult kids living in the area, neither one of which could live right around here. So that's not much of a good answer, but that's the fact of it. So your second part, how do we work together? How do we make things move forward? And from the chamber standpoint, a big chunk of that is just that we are there when discussions happen. We are there to make sure that people know all of the numbers. And they're not just looking at a very narrow slice of the data. They're really understanding how this impacts them and the good news that Carson has to share. That's it, because Carson's got a great story. That, and we also drag in existing businesses for them to talk with. And they say, wait, you're doing what? Because that chili store in Carson, I met a gentleman who has a chain of chili stores back east. He knows the Carson store. And the Carson store makes more money than any 3 of his combined. 3.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, that was a few years ago, but I'm going to say that probably hasn't changed. And he was not saying that his stores were doing poorly.
Okay, well, I
Welcome to Carson.
really like Chili's in Carson.
Yeah.
And I think about it, I remember a few friends who actually worked at Chili's who also lived in Carson. So not only are these businesses attracting the community by way of income generation, but also contributing to the community by creating jobs for people who live in the community. So that's always a great thing. And I would love to see more focus on ensuring that the new businesses do come to the city. There is some baked in policies to ensure a number of community members do have jobs within these new businesses. I think that's really important, if not already addressed. So what I hear, particularly as I'm speaking to Carson residents, we want to ensure, and this is Cap Shop, stay involved, get involved. A lot of what Barry is saying is around planning, right? So look online at the City of Carson website and see when these planning meetings are happening, so you can understand what new businesses are coming or looking to come to the city, being able to work with people who are involved and learn more about how you can advocate to make sure those businesses come to the city. And obviously, not only businesses, but it looks like housing, ensuring that we continue to build housing with specific, I guess, standards in place to ensure the integrity of the city. But we want to continue on that path in order to generate more bodies to attract more interesting stores that keep us in our homes and in our cities, and stay here without having to go and pour into other cities and pay their taxes so they can continue to get nice new things while we stay at one size. So there's definitely work to do, but there is work that we can do as a city and just as a resident, to push some things along. And that's really what CAT is about, informing and educating folks about what's happening in the city so we can do our part. And so, yeah, there, you've given us so much planning and Chamber of Commerce and
there's
great things.
There's just Carson is a good community with good people. And I will tell you, yes, there were some bad days working at City Hall where it's just like, this is such a pain or whatever. But there was never a day when I couldn't think of, well, I knew the Uy family. And the Uy family, they're really nice people. And today they need me to do my best. Or I know the Kimballs. They're this older couple in town, and I want to do it for them. And, there's plenty of nice, really good people, be they residents, business people, the university, full of nice people. And, when we work together, we can do some stuff. And I know that sounds hokey, but it's true. So let me throw you a couple things that people, let's do a little futuring here. So one, thinking of the university is going to be expanding and continuing to expand. That is good news. That is good news for the economy. That's good news for our children. That's good news for everybody. They're doing quality research. They're doing, they're obviously educating, and they're part of the community, and they're very involved. So anyway, so there's a good start. And they're adding more housing, so they'll have fewer commuter students, because you go to Cal State Dominguez Hills, you can't live anywhere within walking distance. There is literally no place. So find me another college campus that has no place you could, anyway. So there's one. Another one is, I know people are very concerned about truck traffic and air pollution. Well, guess what? The state of California is requiring that all those trucks be zero emissions in just a few years. What is the impact of that going to be? Think about that. So that changeover will happen faster than your car and my car, because it's not just you can't buy new, it's you cannot drive those on our streets. So what happens when you have all zero emissions vehicles? And I see from our office, which is on Del Amo at Avalon, I see more and more electric trucks coming through. And I even saw a couple of hydrogen trucks, which is pretty interesting. There's nothing coming out the tailpipe. So that's pretty exciting. So what impact is that going to have? And we have another piece of it is expanding broadband. So you may not realize it, but there are parts of Carson, industrial areas, nice industrial areas, that have no broadband. So how crazy is that? Well, that is a drag on all of them. And there are residential areas of Carson that don't have good, high-speed, affordable broadband. And hey, look how often we're working from home now, right? And people are running businesses from home, and their customers are at home and things like that. So that's something we just got to have. And we're going to have that. I'm very confident of that. There's a lot of work going on. The city's working on it. The utilities are working on it. The state's working on it. South Bay Cities Council of Governments is working on it. Anyway, so there are a lot of players who want to see that succeed. And I think that's going to be a big deal for economic development. And then finally, schools, because education, that's your number one tool for economic development. A good workforce, which this is something that's kind of interesting. I know we did a lot of local hire efforts that didn't pan out. We just didn't hire locals. and didn't really understand why for a while. And then I had a guy working for me. He was working on his PhD at the time. And he said, those people don't live in Carson for those jobs. I'm like, what are you talking about? Well, at the time, they were jobs that paid like $12 an hour. He said, Carson residents, grown adults don't want $12 an hour. Carson residents are better educated than that. They're better trained than that. They do not want $12 an hour jobs. And like, okay, yeah. So really, we work more regionally now for job creation because Carson residents work all over the place. A lot of them work in El Segundo. A lot of them work at the ports. And Carson residents, again, are making good money overall. So when it comes to job creation, we have to think bigger picture and not just, okay, we're putting this one company in that's going to create 40 jobs. And how do we get those to Carson residents? Now we have to think bigger as far as, okay, how do we encourage the companies that create those industry clusters that draw in a whole bunch of jobs? And those jobs may be in Torrance or El Segundo or the south end of Compton, where there's a lot of jobs there. People don't realize that. Or Long Beach, that's fine. That is fine. Knowing that we're also creating jobs, a lot of jobs in Carson. Carson is job rich and generally good jobs. Like look at all the refinery jobs and such, that pays well. And it's very steady. So you got a lot of good opportunities. And then they also have the crews they bring in for the turnarounds and stuff, which those crews come from elsewhere, mostly because they move around between facilities. But some of them are based right here in Carson because there's so much business for them right here. They can go service El Segundo, Wilmington, Carson, Torrance, all of those that are right here. So Santa Fe Springs. So all of these that you have. And so there's an industry cluster. And, it's good news. I'll just say that. There's a lot more good news than bad news.
Lovely. And, when you talk industry cluster, it makes me think about workforce housing and how Carson can be supportive of that and partner with these businesses to create in order to keep more residents and or just people in the city, bring more people who are moving forward, who are steady within the city of Carson. And so, like you said, all good news and lots of great things happening. So again, Carson residents, keep your homes, maintain your homes, upkeep your homes, do all the things because there's a lot of work happening out here to kind of future proof where we are. And so we're in a good space, a good city, a good community, and we want to maintain it. And so the work that the chamber has done and will continue to do really is at the root of how we keep that good stuff going. So with all of that being said, Barry, you have stepped down from the presidential space.
Well, I'm about to, at least. Yeah.
You're about to. You're about to. So with that, what does the future of the chamber look like? And who do you think will be ideal to run the chamber?
Let's see. Well, what I've been telling people is the chamber is in good shape. We're solid financially. We have stable membership. We're active. Mixers have finally recovered from COVID. That we're still, by we, I mean all of us are still getting over COVID, whether we know it or not. I mean, there's just anyway. And I was just in a meeting right before this where it was a Zoom meeting as well, where there were people who are attending and glad they could because they have COVID right now and they've been pretty sick. So anyway, but so we want somebody who can now take the organization up to the next level and help it grow and help this community grow and be what it deserves. Carson deserves to be the nice community that it is. I always felt like at City Hall, the residents were kind to us. And I talked to my friends I'll just be blunt, in some of the wealthy cities and hellholes, just horrible places to work, where residents are entitled and think, if you're working for the government, you can't be worth anything. Seriously. Friends of mine tell me these things. And so, a Carson or a Lomita, I think you're just treated with respect and kindness and able to explain things to people without folks copping an attitude on you. And so, we can grow. And so it's primed to do that. So we just put the job out yesterday to the chamber community, looking for somebody who can do all the stuff I'm doing and a lot more. And also we are considering potentially bringing in a service that runs chambers, because there's really only so much there's just two of us in the office. There's Amy and there's me. There's me and there's Amy and me. That's it. There's just two of us. Now we have volunteers that do a lot for us as well, but just two people in the office. So there's working with the council, there's working with staff, there's getting the information that we need. There's just daily meetings to attend to. We do certificates of origin for exporters. We do a lot of those. There's all the things that we do for our businesses. And it's hard for any two people to do that, to have all the different skills that we need. So that's why we're considering that as another option, where we would still have the office with somebody there regularly, but we'd have like a fractional CEO and fractional social media person. In other words, you pay for the amount that you need, and they can handle our bookkeeping and all of these things. So that's another option. But, we should have somebody good. So we don't need to take somebody who really needs a job and they don't see anything out there. We're not desperate. And like I said, we're in a pretty good place to work from. So I'm excited to hear, what kind of people we're going to get.
That's exciting.
Somebody pretty like this.
Just like you.
Yeah.
Well, Carson residents, you have heard it maybe for the first time. Some of the bombs we've been talking about in the city, getting at Trader Joe's. We have gotten hard evidence or proofing as to why that hasn't happened. We have a better understanding of what our city is, how it's thrived or been built over the years and where it's going. So just things for you to know and continue to follow up on through the City of Carson website. Please stay involved with CAT. We have our Carson Observer, which is a newspaper that goes out and talks about some of the stuff that's happening. Please stay on the lookout for our next newspaper. We have a lot of great stuff coming up about the elections. So stay informed, stay involved.
Oh, and we're going to do a candidate forum on September 26th. And with Cal State Dominguez Hills, it will be recorded. And so an opportunity for people to maybe hear from the candidates a little more.
Yes. And when we say candidates, we are referring to the city council candidates. So September 26th, if you do follow us, you'll have some marketing around that, or some communications around that soon. Barry, it has been such a pleasure to speak with you. I always enjoy learning from you. You're such a wealth of knowledge, and it's just been a pleasure. Again, thank you all for joining us for this podcast. Let us know how we can help you and better serve you. You can always reach out to us on our website. And thank you for listening to the Carson Observer podcast. I'm Kristin Eaves. I'm so honored to serve as the board president of CAT. and we will talk to you soon. Please continue to follow. Take care.